After e4, d5, take the pawn. In this video we're going to go through a little bit of everything, all the things we haven't done so far, because we're approaching the final chapters of how to beat the Scandinavian. So let's start with this one, knight f6 now, ignoring the pawn because the black player wants to take the pawn in d5 with the knight rather than with the queen. So what to do now? Bishop e5 check, we've seen it before. So there are plenty of ways to block. Let's start with this one, bishop to d7. As we mentioned in previous videos, we will play bishop c4. And in previous video we mentioned this move, b5 now, which is the best move. And also through c6 now. The move we're going to see now that is a novelty though is going to be this one, bishop to g4, coming with an attack on the queen. The idea is to pin the knight when we play knight f3. And also removing the bishop from the d file so that that the queen and the knight will both attack in d5 and black will simply take the pawn. That's why we don't play knight f3 here. We remember to play f3. The bishop will have to move. So let's look at this move, bishop to f5. Okay, white plays knight to c3 and protects the pawn more. And now the pawn in d5 cannot be taken yet. So two things we're going to look at. The typical moves in this position are very simple. c6, gambiting another pawn. In this case, if take black at least get some development. Or knight to b7, the idea of playing knight to b6, attacking the bishop, forcing the bishop to move. And then putting the triple attack over d5. And this is the best option. Let's quickly mention that d6, the c6, you take the pawn. There's no reason to let black take you. So you take here, knight takes back. So we gave up on that pawn. Although we have a pawn advantage now. So knight g2, e2 comes now, e6, and now castle. We have a pawn advantage. How do we solidify the advantage? Okay, bishop c5 check, coming with development. King h1. d4 is not possible because it's attacked multiple times. So it looks like this is actually good for black. But in reality, after castling and d3, white's position is completely solid. And we have a pawn advantage for no reason. Two ideas on how to take the game from now on. Let's say, for example, knight to d5, improve the position of the knight, or knight to a5, trying to remove our bishop pair. So, for example, knight to d5. Okay, you take it. Pawn takes back. The pawn is isolated. There's no disadvantage or anything. Knight a5 attacking the bishop. Okay, bishop a4. Don't make that trade happen. a6, threatening to play b5 and forcing a bishop swap. Okay, play knight g3. Attacking the opponent bishop, bishop g6, c3. And now our bishop will have a shelter to go to. And now the black player will have to simply remove the knight and we're just winning this endgame. If black plays this move, d4, this is an interesting idea. Letting himself fork. But now black can play d takes c3. We take the bishop and a bishop takes in d3 is a good idea for the black player. It's really strong, but it's not enough. White simply plays rook e1, position evaluated +3, almost +4. There's absolutely no compensation. And in this position, earlier we tried knight d5. What happens if knight to a5 straight away attacking a bishop? Is the black player going to be able to remove our bishop pair? Well, yeah. So you play knight g3, counter-attacking the opponent bishop pair. So after bishop g6, b3 by white. Because after the knight takes us, then you can take with the b pawn. And now let's make an example. Let's say black plays knight to bishop d4. Knight g2, e2 is the best move, attacking the bishop. The bishop will have to move again. And there's just nothing there. You preserve your pawn advantage. And this is better for white. If instead, let's make another example in this position. Black plays a6. To provide the shelter for the bishop so the bishop can stay in this diagonal forever. It's a very strong bishop if you think about it. Rook to b1. Going for the pawn in b7. Okay, b5. And then we're going to take the pawn. What else do you think that can happen here? Rook b8 isn't possible because you play bishop f4. The rook has to move. Or our opponent will have to give us the bishop pair. In which case, black will give up the bishop pair and it's just a game with a pawn disadvantage for no reason. If the bishop does go to d6 and you just take it. Queen takes back. And now a4 to put more defense over the square, b5. And that's it, you carry on with this extra pawn. And in this position, what if black plays tries to counterattack with b5? Yeah, take. At least now black has a rook on an open file. Queen e7, the best move, defending the bishop. This doesn't work because you just play a4. The pawn is defended by the knight. Rook f to b8, trying to trade. What happens now? Bishop to g5. This is the best move. The idea is to double up the pressure on the attack on the knight in e4 and smash the pawn structure. Bishop to d4, attacking the knight. Rook takes, knight to b5. That's it. Let's simplify even more. Bishop d7, bishop b6. These are all best move according to the engine. But black can't do anything because he played a faulty variation. Knight e4. Best move would be bishop takes. And now pawn takes back. This is a completely winning endgame for so many reasons for the white player. Let's go from the start so we can look at that line again. Knight f6, bishop check. Bishop blocks. Now bishop c4, protecting the pawn. So okay, bishop g4. This is now giving double attack on this pawn, so we have to play f3, remain active. Okay, bishop to f5, that's what we're looking at. Knight to c3, defend the pawn further. And we went through c6, and that just doesn't work. It's a free pawn. So let's look at this move. Knight to d7. This move I find it annoying myself because eventually black is unstoppable from the idea of playing knight b6 and put triple attack over the square d5. And then what to do? Okay, g4, attack the bishop. There's two moves now that are possible. Bishop retreat into g6 or knight to b6, counter-attacking our bishop. Let's briefly mention the two of them. Okay, bishop goes back now, f4. The idea is f5 winning a piece. Knight to b6 now. Okay, check. c6 and you just take the pawn. You go double attack. The pawn can't take back his bishop takes and then you're taking the rook. It's obviously game over. That's not going to happen. So knight to d6 here is stupid. Knight to b6 can't happen. The black player will have to play something like h6, right? Or h5 to counter-attack and allow a shelter for the bishop. But this doesn't work. Okay, let's make an example. h5, right? f5. The bishop has to go up. g5. And the knight can't really go to g4, which seems to be the only square where he can go to, apart from g8. But the game is a joke, a literal joke. White plays d4 now. Best move. This is to stop the knight from going to e5. And now h3 traps the knight. Position evaluated plus 350 or something like that. So in this position, instead of knight here to g4, what if knight to g8 for real? Now this comes with queen h5. This is not a poison pawn. Bishop f5 is not possible because, you know, there's a rook hanging. This is a ridiculous game now. There's literally no way to develop anything for our opponent. Everything loses stuff. Look how much attack we have over so many different squares on the opponent territory. Knight to e5, trying to attack our bishop and give some space for the queen to move and maybe castle long and hope for a miracle. You simply play bishop to b3, getting out of danger. And when the queen goes to d6, allowing a long castle, black says, you know what, take my pawn in f7. I don't mind. I mean, obviously not now because with the knight, but you can play d4, the knight moves, and then you take in f7. The thing is you play d4 already, black can't castle, that's the thing. And the knight's gone nowhere safe to go except d7. Now again, can our opponent castle? Looks like yes. Our best move now is knight g2, e2, and after long castle, black can try to play for the miracle. But now you take the pawn in f7, this is not a poison pawn. Again, our opponent just doesn't have any way to move anything. Let's look at this move. Knight to b6. Knight to e4, attacking the queen. And then nothing stops our knight from reaching the land, the square. e6. Position evaluated plus 6. There's too many things that can happen now, but like none of them saves any chance for our opponent. So we're going to close the line here. And by the way, in this position earlier you saw how h5 was very weakening and it didn't work. What if black plays h6 instead? Okay, well fine, you play d4 anyway. And after knight to b6, you still have this move, bishop to b5 check. Although in this case you might argue the knight is still in f6 and maybe you can go to d7 and protect that further because c6 now is not possible. And after knight to d7, knight f to d7, black is threatening to play a6, the bishop will have to move, and finally our opponent will start breathing. Okay, well, f5 comes now, attacking the bishop, bishop moves, and now knight to f3 developing. a6 attacking the bishop, what to do now? We can't go here without being swapped, can't go here without being taken. Maybe bishop d3, well, bishop d3 is the best move. because we don't have to worry about our opponent being able to swap anything. So let's look at this move now, because black can't develop anything. I mean, maybe knight to f6, attacking this pawn. But before we mention that, let's quickly mention that g5, the idea of fianchettoing this bishop, doesn't work, because you will simply take the pawn in g6. Obviously, this will happen if black plays g6 as well. You take, and after take, our opponent is just completely damaged. Let's say, for example, take, and now, well, taking like this will lock the bishop in even further. Although you might argue our opponent can eventually push g5. So let's make an example. If black takes the pawn, you play g5. And now, when takes, knight g5 is devastating. You also have bishop g5 ideas. Basically, everything wins here. But the knight in g5 will have lots of squares to go to. Queen f3, going for f7, go rook f1. It's unbelievable. Doing this, h5 closing the fight doesn't work because of knight h4, doubling the attack on this square. And king f7 is never possible because you can just play check. Even rook f1, it's up to you. Everything wins at that point. And by the way, in this position, if after taking the pawn, if black takes with the bishop, there's no way to come back here, because you just take the bishop, pawn takes, and a queen d3 going for this usual attack. It's a great position. White's about to castle. Position evaluated plus 450. So let's close this line here. And let's make a quick recap in order to understand the patterns better. Check, bishop d7, bishop c4, protecting the pawn. Bishop g4 attacking, counter-attacking with f3. Bishop to f5. Knight to c3, defend the pawn more. And now, we're looking at knight to d7. So, knight to b6 should be able to recapture this pawn without bad compensation. And now, g4, as mentioned already. Bishop g6, we already saw what happens. Doesn't work. So, what happens after knight to b6? Here we don't play this move, bishop b5, because it can be blocked by the bishop. And then black will have loads of attack over d5, and there's nothing happening really. You see, if you go here, then there's a swap happening. If you don't swap, you're going to have to get passive, but then black will take. And you can't go to c4 anymore because knight b6 is controlling that square. So you don't play that move. Here you just play... So after knight b6 attacking the bishop, you don't take this bishop because you have double isolated pawn. You play this move, queen e2. So we're willing to give up the bishop pair in this position, but that comes at a very important cost. After knight takes and queen takes back, this pawn is now secured. And black will have to move the bishop again. So bishop to d7. g5, attacking the knight. One of the attacker of this pawn, meaning that when the knight is gone, we're going to be even more safe about this pawn, the safe extra pawn. Okay, knight g2, e2. g6, trying to fianchetto. d4, bishop g7. Looks like maybe the black player is down a pawn, but he will be able to play a normal game, maybe some development. You got the bishop pair. I don't see why the black player should resign already. Absolutely not. a6, long castle. b5, attacking the queen. Queen to c5. Rook to b8. And now knight to e4. And that's it. Position is secured. We're 100% okay. We're in much better position than our opponent. b4, let's continue the attack. Bishop to d2, putting double attack on the pawn. a5 can't happen because you can take it. It's not a poison pawn, even though it looks like. Because after take back, you go knight to c3, and you should be able to play, knight b1, just in case. We're attacking also the rook when the rook comes to e2. There's no problem. So let's look at this move. Rook to b5, attacking our queen. Queen to c4. a5 now. This looks scary. This type of attack always kind of scares me a bit. Especially in blitz. But there's nothing. Remember, when your opponent has 2 pawns and you go 3, there's absolutely no way that it could possibly be any dangerous. So the best move now is knight to g3. And this knight is trapped. So black best option would be to take the knight. And now take back because otherwise we were going to take and break the pawn structure. And black has got nowhere safe the castle. Knight g3, take. And now rook to b7 is the best move. Okay, bishop to f4. Putting more attack over this square. Bishop to b5, attacking the queen, queen c5. Now you have the demonstration that this pawn in d5 here cannot be taken. So it is possible to defend it forever. Castle. Looks like our opponent will be able to maybe play a normal game. Rook to d2. Okay, and that's it. We're going to close the line here. Just a couple more moves. Black, there's no compensation. e6 here, you can take, and that's it. Our opponent is in big trouble. f5 could be an idea. Maybe trying to see, black can gain some space, but you just take en passant. Pawn takes back, and now d6, the best move. We're finally going to be able to take this pawn. If we get taken, then we can get to start swapping. We also have a knight jumping, the bishop. There's plenty of ways to win this game, but you also have an idea of check, taking this rook. It depends on what our opponent does. So let's restart, and in this position take, and now knight f6, bishop check, bishop blocks, bishop c4. Okay, bishop g4 comes with an attack, f3. Let's look at this variation, bishop to h5. Okay, knight to c3 comes now, developing. And now the idea of knight to b6 is kind of like, it's not going to be a transposition because there was a bishop in f5 before. But now you do the same thing, g4, bishop g6, and it's very similar. Now you play f4. And this idea of knight b6 counterattacking the bishop doesn't work because the bishop, the light square bishop, remember this, the bishop is now out of this diagonal, which is the diagonal from where the bishop was threatening to go back to d7, force the swap with our bishop, and take the free pawn. I mean, not free pawn, but recapture the lost pawn in d5. Now that the bishop has been moved to this diagonal here, now this bishop is never going to be a problem. Like, black can never play this because you always have a check. Okay, c6 is never possible because you got two attackers. And d7 here, black loses control of the square in d5. And you've also got f5 idea. So obviously knight to b6 idea is just not possible at the moment. f4, h6, queen e2. Developing. Knight to b6 now. Okay, well, check. Oops. Knight to b6 now. Okay, well, check. Knight to d7. The idea is now to maybe play a6, force a swap, and then black will start hoping that he will find a way to capture the pawn in d5. Okay, well, f5. Bishop h7. Pawn to d4. Preventing any idea of jumping to potential good squares in the future. The center belongs to us. a6. Bishop to d3. Now this pawn cannot be taken. It's defended. So what can black do? Maybe knight f6? Okay, knight f6 going for that pawn. Fine. Let's leave it because black has let's leave it because black has made such an investment in trying to go and recapture that pawn that obviously we were able to just develop so much. And our development is fantastic. I don't even care that black takes that pawn now. Because when this happens, let's say knight to d5, knight to e5 comes. And we're positioned like evaluated as if we were up a piece. If black takes our knight, okay, pawn takes back. Now black can take the queen to d6 and then castle long. Although not yet. I mean, if you think about it, we have this move, knight to f7. So that's just too strong. So you might argue, what if instead of queen d6 to prepare for castling, black plays queen d5 with an attack on the rook? This obviously doesn't work. But because we're going to castle, right? We're perfectly safe the castle. Black can now castle and he has a queen protecting f7. But this is not going to work because you obviously play bishop c4. The bishop is defended. You got double attack on the two rooks there. You play knight f7, you win material. And in this position, instead of castling, what if our opponent played, let's say, e6? Trying to develop maybe the other bishop. Too late now. We still play bishop c4, queen to d6. And we got a lot of attack over that pawn. Besides, our best move now is bishop to f4. This is deadly. There's no coming back now for the opponent. We've got too many threats. Knight g6, attacking the rook. Knight f7 as well. Everything is a threat at the moment. So what if instead black had chosen d8 instead of d6? Well, now we just play this move, right? Knight f7. We've seen this thematic sacrifice. Look how much protection we have. This knight can't be taken because literally checkmate. So let's do one more recap. And we can see something slightly different. So knight f6, bishop b5, bishop d7, bishop c4, protect the pawn. Bishop g4 attacks us, counterattack with f3. Bishop h5 is what we're looking at now. Okay, knight c3, defend the pawn more. So what happens if c6 now? Okay, g4, attack the bishop, bishop moves, and now f4. So a few options now appear to be possible. Obviously, taking the pawn with the pawn now is not possible because bishop b5 is check. And when black blocks, he has to block. Now you can play f5, which traps the bishop. There is absolutely no way to stop this capture of the bishop. Attacking a bishop here doesn't make sense. You can just take, and then win the bishop. There's no compensation unless black counterattacks. So this is the engine move, the only move that is possible in this position. And we have to take the bishop now. This is the best move. And black takes our piece. So now we're equal in material. We obviously now go on, we take the pawn with check, king takes back, bishop c4 check. Pinning the knight doesn't make sense. You got queen f3 check, putting more attack with the knight, winning the game. e6 blocking. Okay, white goes on with knight f3. And now any capture of our opponent here just allows us to develop better. Position evaluated plus 240 or something like that. Let's look at black at least trying to develop. Maybe play knight to bishop d6 and play rook f8. Maybe rook e8 and bring the king back or something like that. We will just take the pawn in c3 with no compensation. So I'm afraid we're gonna have to look at that move. Basically our opponent taking us. So let's say that pawn takes in c3. Looking for a queen swap of queens that will be helpful. Okay, bishop takes. Knight to g4, winning this pawn. Look, the position is just ugly. Also because this doesn't work. Knight to g5 check. The queen can't take because the knight is defended by the bishop, and the queen will pick up the opponent knight. So that doesn't work. So instead of that move, which is a blunder, bishop to d6, developing. Queen to e2, ready to castle alongside, and also putting more attack over this pawn. There is no coming back now. Queen to d7, protected that pawn further. Here we will play bishop takes, and the king can't take back, so basically you win a queen. If queen takes, then knight g5 wins the queen. So let's drop this line here. So let's make another recap. You might ask why so many recaps in this specific video. Well, that's because I personally have a problem with the Scandinavian. I hate playing with it, against it, and I need to study it more and more in order to improve my performance against it. So that's why I'm doing this basically for myself. And for you, of course. So bishop d7, bishop c4. Okay, bishop g4, counterattack, f3. We're looking at the variation with bishop h5, knight c3, protecting the pawn more. Okay, let's look at this variation with c6. Black tries to go on with development. In this case, we play g4, bishop goes away, f4, threatening to take it. And we mentioned that pawn takes doesn't work. So let's look at the two options with the h pawn. But obviously, as you can tell, it's really bad. Let's start with h6, f5. Bishop goes back to h7 and can't move anymore. Queen f3 comes now. And now we are indeed defending the pawn d5 enough. So pawn takes though, knight takes. Knight takes, bishop takes, a lot of attack over the square, b7. Knight to d7, going for development. Bishop b7. How do you deal with this specific line that I encountered myself? It was a blitz and I couldn't personally finish this off, although it was completely winning and it was really frustrating. Because my opponent was one of those players that even though they're completely lost, they keep playing hoping to flag you. The true definition of a chess player without a girlfriend. b3, and now knight to e5, attacking the queen. Bishop c6 check, giving this up. It's fine. Okay. Knight takes, queen blocks. Take. Knight f3. We're exploiting the fact that we have better pawn structure and massive majority on the queen side to trade everything, even though our opponent still has the bishop pair and it's an open endgame. And now also knight e5, such a strong threat. So after f6, bishop to b2, g6, forcing a swap in which, well, we have to take, as you can tell, bishop takes and now castle long. And this is a winning endgame for white, even though black has the bishop pair, but black has 4 pawns, we have 6. So this is actually a very good advantage. So in this position, instead of h6, what if h5? Okay, f5 comes anyway, bishop h7, g5 attacking the knight. Knight g4, you've seen this pattern before. d4 threatening h3, trapping the knight. d4 is important to stop knight to e5. What to do now? There's nothing our opponent can do except, okay, let's look at this. Bishop takes in f5. Okay, h3. And now the only move will be take here, counter-attacking on our bishop. Bishop takes, attacking b7. So knight to c6. We can take the knight. Bishop takes back, attacking our queen. Bishop f3. And now remember, knight to d4 is not really a good move because you can simply take this bishop. And that's it. The pawn will never be able to take you back because the rook will be falling. So in this position, what if the bishop takes our bishop? Develop, take the knight, e6, queen to d3, bishop e7. putting more attack over this pawn. Bishop to d2. Doesn't matter, we're just going to develop. Queen to b6. Castle. Rook to d8. Developing on the queen, on the file of our queen. Queen e4. Getting the queen out of the way. And now knight to d4 appears to be possible, but you just play bishop e3. And that's it. There's no checks. I mean, yes, there is a check, but you can just take. No checks actually work. You'll be, you're pinning the knight, you're winning material. e5 cannot push. Obviously, you can take. So in this position, we mentioned that bishop f5, the idea of counterattack doesn't work to protect the knight. I mean, to counterattack at least. Let's look at this counterattack. b5, okay. Bishop b3, a5, threatening to trap the bishop. Okay, take this pawn. And now, b4, attacking the knight, is just met with bishop a4. With all the threats of the war, c7 wins the game on the spot. And this is just absolutely terrible. Black will have to play queen c7 to stop the pawn, but then you can attack it more. So obviously this is not working, it's game over. So b4 is a bad move. What happens if black develops? Knight c6. Okay, h3, the knight. Okay, h3, right? The knight is trapped. If queen takes the pawn here, don't panic, there's nothing here. You just take the knight. That's it, free knight. And there's no attack or anything that the queen is actually threatening. So let's look instead at knight to d4. Again, here there's absolutely no threats whatsoever. a4 is never really a thing here because you can play bishop d5 with an attack on the rook whilst you attack the knight. The best move here is to take the knight as well. So there's absolutely nothing. So let's go back at this position here after f4. The move we didn't see is this one. Bishop to e4, attacking the rook. Okay, take the bishop. Knight takes back. And now d3 attacks the knight. Two options we're going to look at. Either knight to d6, attacking our bishop, or knight to f6, returning to the natural square. Let's start with knight f6. Okay, here you just take this one. Knight takes back. c3. We have the bishop pair in this case. And we're up a pawn. So this is even better than previous lines. e6, queen e2. Bishop to d6. Too late now because we're going to play g5. And this g5 move is the type of move you can play even if they play h6, because you got the support of the pawn in f4. Knight to d7, removing. Okay, knight f3. Castle. d4. The center is fantastic for the white player. When we play knight e5, we're going to be gloriously sitting in that square. Rook e8, h4. We're going for that. King. Knight to b6. Bishop d3. Recognize the patterns. a5. There's no way, no other moves that can be played here. Bishop to d2, a4. Queen e4, threatening to go to h7. g6, h5. Weakening the king side. Queen to c7. All of these are best moves, but they don't work. hg, hg. Knight to e5. The knight is fantastically placed in that square. We're threatening way too many things at the same time. We're also threatening to simply castle and then double up the rooks on the h5. It's a strong attack. Our opponent, let's assume our opponent will take us. Knight takes, pawn takes, and now bishop to f8, putting more defense over the king. Queen h4, threatening checkmate. Bishop g7, defending. Queen check, king moves. And now castle short. The idea is to take in g6, right? That's unstoppable. King can't move anywhere because then you will take the bishop. f5, then you just take en passant. That's it. So in this position, back we played knight f6. What if knight to d6 with a counter-attack on our bishop? This seems to be more reasonable. Best move now is bishop to d2. Ignore the bishop pair being taken, because when that happens, you take back and you've got an extra pawn. Now, our opponent can take us and you ignore it. Queen f3. Threatening to go to b7, and it's a very strong attack. Let's make an example. Okay, if black plays e6, supporting the pawn, then long castle. Much better position for us, because after all the swaps, this king is very exposed. I mean, what to do in this position? Let's say if black just develops, plays bishop e7. You can't really take this pawn, right, without giving such a strong attack to us. Bishop to c3. Threatening g7. Castle doesn't work because you will take in d5. And you've got triple attack there, so you can take the rook. It's much better position. So obviously in this position, what if knight to c6, developing? Okay, same thing, bishop to c3, that's how it works. The bishop now can't really develop. in any meaningful way. d4 doesn't work. It looks like there's enough attackers, but now you just play knight e2. The pawn is pained after all, and now you're attacking it more and more. e5 cannot happen because you're gonna take it. Okay, you might argue, okay, bishop c5, getting stubborn. But now queen to e4, ultimating the attack on that pawn. So here after queen e3 we mentioned how that move doesn't work. What if knight to d7? Going with development. Okay, castle long as well. And now a move like e6, you just take in d5 simply because you have double attack. So that doesn't work. There's no compensation there. Pawn taken in c4. Okay, fine. We take here in b7. Rook to b8. It looks like, you know, black might have some compensation in the development and say, you can take this pawn. But look, black has no development, which means he can't really start an attack. e6, try to develop the bishop. f5, ultimating the attack on the pawn in e6. Bishop to b4. Take the pawn in e6. Bishop takes us with check. Rook takes back. Pawn takes us. Queen e6, queen e7. Queen takes back in c4. There is absolutely nothing for our opponent. This check doesn't work. You can just block, move king to b1 eventually. So let's look now. Let's change topic a bit. After taking knight f6, we mentioned bishop b5. That's what we play. Okay, knight b to d7. Let's look at this move. In this case, our opponent keeps the attack on d5 and preserves the whole thing that that we were threatening, and also wants to keep the bishop pair. He says, you know what, I'm going to play this move now. I'm going to stick around. I don't care that this pawn in d5, I haven't recaptured it yet because I'm going to recapture it later on. I'm going to play a6, maybe b5 if you move the bishop until your bishop is ineffective. And then maybe knight b6, and I'm going to take this pawn, and I'm going to keep the bishop pair and play a normal game. So the black player has a little bit more patience in playing this move. Okay, knight f3. And now black already has a chance of recapturing that pawn. So we have seen this in a previous video. Make sure you watch all my videos before you watch this one, so you understand how to beat the Scandinavian. So anytime you're playing against a Scandinavian person, you can beat them, regardless of their level. By the way, this video does not promote violence of any kind. d4. And now a6, attacking a bishop. We know that we have to take the knight. Bishop takes back. And now castle. So in the previous video, we went through e6 and everything that happens next. Make sure you watch that video. Well, in this case, we're going to look at b5. The reason is simple. As you recall from previous videos, what we're trying to do here is play c4 and gain a lot of space in the center. So obviously b5 stops that from happening. Now how to continue? Knight e5. Okay, e6 now appears to be possible because now we don't have that c4 tempo winning move and so on. So white will play this move, a4, trying to disrupt the direction of this b5 pawn. If pawn takes, then you do have c4. So let's look at this. Bishop to d6. Queen to g4. Attacking g7. And now bishop e6 is also a threat in case black castle. So g6. Rook e1. Castle. Bishop h6 attacking the rook. Rook e8. Take the pawn. And now obviously taking the pawn is not possible because rook takes rook. Queen takes back. The bishop becomes free to be captured. So in this position, before recapturing, I mean, what if black just captures with the bishop? Okay, what c4 is now possible, right? So it's a fork with winning material. Black takes our bishop first. What to do next? Recapture the bishop. The fork remains because the queen is guarding the pawn. Knight to b4, trying to go for a fork that wins back some material. Rook to d1, stopping that from happening. Bishop to d7. The black player saved material, but we're up in development. Knight c3. This is so much better. What to do now for black? What if black plays, let's say, f5, trying to counterattack? You just take en passant, so that's stupid, doesn't work. Knight to c6, queen to f4 is the best move. So in this position, obviously f5 is a bad move. What if black plays knight to c6, going for this pawn, putting the knight in a better place, queen f4. Okay, queen e7, developing, knight to e4, exploiting the weak squares. f5 is now forced. Pawn takes, and now queen to f7. No resisting here. Knight to g5, and that's it. e5, counterattacking our queen is the only move, but now you take this bishop. This is the best move. And now if pawn takes our queen, we take the opponent queen. We're protected by the knight. We're winning in material. If instead queen takes f7 with check, taking the rook, f7 comes with check. and the king will have to move to the only square, but that gives us checkmate. Right, so a million things happened in this video. Thanks for following so far. And make sure you keep subscribing and sending my video to your friends. Keep subscribing so I can hit 5,000 subscribers very soon. See you soon.